السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Al-Mulk. Surah Al-Mulk, and we'll go through inshallah ta'ala 3 verses 20 to 22 inshallah. We'll start with the recitation inshallah. So open the Mus'haf and try to correct the recitation inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. Okay, the first ayah, أمن هذا, meme with shadda takes 2 counts. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم. جند إخفاء نون with سكون after the dal, and then the tanween after it lam is إدغام without غنة, without a tone. جند لكم ينصركم, the noon with سكون after it صاد إخفاء, and the غنة is heavy. ينصركم من دون الرحمن. 2 memes becomes 1 with 2 counts. And then من إخفاء من دون الرحمن, and the ra is heavy. إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. إن الكافرون. Then أمن is the same thing. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم. The ra is heavy, and then the qaf and kaf. يرزقكم. And when you're saying the qaf and the kaf right after each other, you feel the place where the articulation point, if it's correct to say, or the place where the letter is coming from. Qaf is further in your mouth than the kaf. Qa, ka, qa, yarzuquku, yarzuqu, qa. The qaf is back there, and the kaf right in front of it. Because the qaf is heavier than the kaf. يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه. إن أمسك, no غنى, nothing. رزقه, the ra with kasra is light. بل لجوا, 2 lambs becomes 1 without a غنى, without a tone. بل لجوا في عتو, like 2 waws, because the tanween is not to be said with a غنى, with a tone. في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي, نون with سكون after it ياء, إدغام with غنة. مكبا على, تنوين after it عين, no غنة, no nothing. This is إظهار. على وجهه, 4 to 5 counts. أهدى, أهدى, and the same thing with the mad. أهدى, 4 to 5 counts. أمن يمشي, the same thing. سويا على, no غنة, nothing, it's إظهار. على صراط مستقيم. The sad with kasra, make sure that you're making it sad, not seen, but at the same time it's with a kasra. Si, sira, sira, and then the ra is heavy. Siratim, tanween after it meme is idgham. The translation, or who is it that could be an army for you to aid you other than the most merciful? the disbelievers are not but in delusion? Or who is it that could provide for you if he withheld his provision, but they have persisted it in insolence and aversion? There is one who walks fallen on his face. Then is one who walks fallen on his face better guided, or one who walks erect on a straight path? So these are in these three verses. Of course, if we go back and see the relationship between this verse and the one before it, it's basically going from one objective to the other in the surah, after stating the evidences that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of the Alameen, therefore He's the only one worthy of worship. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in these verses that basically giving with the clear proofs and evidences that nobody can push away the harm or the punishment or anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the owner of all things. So after reminding them that they are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and mentioning the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and warning them of the punishment of Allah, nobody can protect them from the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the ayah says, and it's repeated, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ. Right? And this is like, أَمَّنْ هَذَا, which is basic, is it he who, once you see actually, it's a question, right? So there's no way that can come in a way that it's not a question. So this is a question, and the questions are in the Quran are so many, with many different meanings to them. So this is not a question from someone that doesn't know, but rather it's question from the Most High, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the unknower, question to state a fact, to basically, they call it al-istifham lit-ta'jiz. And al-ta'jiz is when, from al-ajz, is when someone is unable. So the question is to make them unable to answer in any way or form except one thing and one thing only, which basically proves against them. It's a proof against them. Is when you corner someone in a debate and you ask them a question and the answer is basically what you are stating. So this is, when the question is, is there anyone that would save you from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Of course, no one, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of all things. So who can then aid you, can protect you if the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes? So, and that's why أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي, who is this one that is جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ. Jund is army, is deputies, is usually when someone has jund, they, a king, he has an army, he has, people that would support him, that would defend him. You cannot imagine a king or a ruler without an army. So, who is the one that has jund, has people that would support him? أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ ينصركم من دون الرحمن. ينصركم, that will give you victory, will aid you, من دون الرحمن, other than Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful. And also to reflect upon Ar-Rahman is being mentioned here, not the Almighty, for example. And it's, every name of Allah, every attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it refers to the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He's the Almighty, and He's the most merciful and everything. But what's the significance of mentioning min dun ar-Rahman, other than Ar-Rahman? First of all, yansurukum, that means He's the only one that would give you victory. No one has the ability to push away harm from you. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ لَهُمْ آلِهَةٌ تَمْنَعُهُم مِّن دُونِنَا. Do they have aliha, things that they worship that would prevent them from us, prevent them from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the significance of mentioning Ar-Rahman, as the ulama they say, is basically what's mentioned afterwards, and in the previous ayah, in the previous ayah, when it says مَا يُمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنِ, right? The birds that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding them, meaning and giving them the ability to fly. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is the most merciful. And His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala is in such a way that even in the punishment of Allah, it doesn't come immediately. Warnings and messengers are being sent. And the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically for them to subject themselves to the mercy of Allah. Right? And it's and another meaning is, as ulama, they say that the disbelievers, they denied the name Ar-Rahman. The people of Quraysh, they denied the name Ar-Rahman to be a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that Allah subhanahu, if they believe in Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bestow His mercy upon them. So in al-kafiruna illa fi ghurur, indeed the kafirun, the disbelievers, are in delusion, ghurur. And this is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Qamar, أَكُفَّارُكُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أُولَئِكُمْ. Is your kuffar is better than the previous kuffar? They are the same thing. The previous kuffar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them. And the present kuffar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, He is the one that is able to destroy them. There is nothing difference. And that's why we always say there is no difference between the people of today and the nations before. Human beings are the same human beings, the same diseases in the hearts, the same characteristics between the believers and the disbelievers, and the same ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. But really, people are in delusion. They think that they are so sophisticated. For example, nowadays, that humanity never reached this level of sophistication in intellect and reason, and it's all delusion. It is not true. And this is how they always, the disbelievers, they always get deceived by the ilm that they have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated that in the Quran, that they thought that they have ilm. So it's so this is again, as Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, since we're going through the tafsir of Imam Sa'di, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, addressing the rebellious among the disbelievers, those who turned away from the truth, saying, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ يَنْصُرُكُم مِّن دُونِ الرَّحْمَنِ. Who's the one that would aid you other than Ar-Rahman? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman, willed for you evil, no one can push that away from you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is An-Nasir. He is the one that aids. He's the one that gives victory. He's the one that gives might and power and honor, and He's the one that humiliates. And if someone is being given with their disbelief some form of might or power or honor on the face of earth, it is something that is temporary. And the end, and that's what matters, and the real victory and aid that is going to be forever is for the people upon the truth. And as a matter of belief, that if all of the creation of Allah, they get together to give victory to someone, they won't be able to do so except by the will of Allah. Or to push away harm from someone, they won't be able to do except by the will of Allah. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to Abdullah ibn Abbas when he was a young boy, saying to him, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ عَلَى أَن يَنْفَعُوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَمْ يَنْفَعُوكَ إِلَّا بِشَيْءٍ قَدْ كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ لَكَ. If the ummah, if the entire world, they get together to try to benefit you with something, they would never be able to do so except by something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for it to happen. وَإِنِ اجْتَمَعَتْ عَلَى أَن يَضُرُّوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَمْ يَضُرُّوكَ إِلَّا بِشَيْءٍ قَدْ كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ لَكَ وَعَلَيْكَ. And if they get together to cause harm to you, so push that away, push that fear in your heart from other than Allah. And that is basically one of the objectives of the ayah, that the only one that you fear is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if they all get together to cause harm to you, the slightest harm or the worst harm, they won't be able to do so except by something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained and written for you. They don't own anything. لا يملكون مثقال ذرة. The disbelievers, the human beings, they don't even own the weight of a mustard seed, let alone they own their own selves or they own others. This is all by the permission of Allah. Allah ordained things, testing people, trials in this life. So basically, rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Then the ayah, and then again, as we see, the ayah ends, Inil kafirun. Indeed, the kafirun are in delusion. This is the base. This is what delusion is. What delusion means? You think that you're upon something when you're not. How is that? When they're given power, when they're given wealth, and they become in delusion as a result of this, and they continue to be upon falsehood. And this is something that should not deceive the believers, because the believers, they see there's haqq and there's batil. Be upon the truth, because the truth prevails. The next ayah, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي يَرْزُقُكُمْ إِنْ أَمْسَكَ رِزْقَهُ بَلْ لَجُّوا فِي عُتُوٍّ نُفُورٍ. Who's the one that يَرْزُقُكُمْ? Who's the one that would provide for you? إِنْ أَمْسَكَ رِزْقَهُ. If he withholds his rizq. The question again is for the ta'jiz, is to corner them. They have inability to give any answer but one answer, and one answer only. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. So if he withhold your provisions, who can go against the will of Allah and provide for you? No one. These idols, these images, human beings, nothing whatsoever. So the reality of them is بَلَّجُّوا. That means they continue to be in their transgression and their evil. فِي عُتُوٍ وَنُفُورٍ. In utu, in stubbornness and arrogance and turning away. وَنُفُورٍ, turning away from the truth. This is basically what they are. بَلَّجُّوا فِي عُتُوٍ وَنُفُورٍ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afterwards, he says, giving the example of the believers versus the disbelievers. Right? After mentioning all of this, saying أَفَمَنْ يَمْشِي مُكِبًّا عَلَى وَجْهِهِ أَهْدَى أَمَّنْ يَمْشِي سَوِيًّا عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Right? So أَفَمَنْ يَمْشِي, another question, is the one that is walking مُكِبًّا عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. مُكِبًّا عَلى وَجْهِهِ, falling on his face. So this is the example of the disbelievers. So the disbeliever is like the one walking on his face. He's not walking upright. He's walking on his face. And when someone walks on his face, what happens? He's not able to see his direction. He is deviated. He's just, imagine. So look at if you imagine that physically, that means he's lost. That means he is in such a, very difficult state. He's not guided whatsoever. And in the day of judgment, the disbelievers or the arrogant ones would be resurrected walking on their faces, as the Prophet ﷺ stated in the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, that the arrogant ones will be resurrected walking on their faces. So when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, كيف يحشر الناس على وجوههم, how will people be resurrected or gathered in the day of judgment on their faces? He says, أليس الذي أمشاهم على أرجلهم قادرا على أن يمشيهم على وجوههم. The Prophet ﷺ said, is the one, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that made them walk on their legs in this world. Isn't he able to make them walk on their faces? So this is physically is going to happen in the hereafter. And what physically is going to happen in the hereafter, the believers, they see it, right, in this world by the wahi, by the revelation from Allah. So what do we mean by this? The hellfire in the day of judgment. This is a physical thing. And the disbelievers will be punished in its sinners and so on. The believers, they see the fire of this world is the kufr, disbelief, bid'ah, innovations in the deen, sins, disobedience to Allah. This is the fire of this world. Would you throw yourself in a fire in this world? You would never do that if you're sane. So this is the fire, because this is what leads to the fire. And anyone with reason, if there's a path or a mean that leads to a certain destination, it takes the same rulings of it. So if you have a road or a path that would take you to your destruction, this is a road of destruction. If you have a path or a mean that take you to the best thing ever, this is a path of goodness and salvation, as good as the objective. Even if the path to it is a path that is full of tests and trials and so on. And we gave that example many times, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he said, like if you lift your head up and you are in a path and you see the end of it, you see the Jannah, right? If you see the Jannah with your own eyes and you're walking, would you care what are you stepping on? If the path is very clear that would take you and the end of it is the Jannah, you won't really care, even if you would step on even fire or things that would harm you. Why? Because your heart is already attached to what no eyes have seen, no ears have heard, no hearts have imagined. And this is for sure is the truth for you. So you'll be able to walk, no problem. And the same thing if a person look up and he sees the hellfire, even if the path is the most desirable thing, he would not be able to even walk a step in there, because this is the step to his own destruction. So these types of meanings should be well established in the hearts. Things are by the hearts, is not just by what we physically see and taste and feel. Otherwise, a person would be in delusion, as it's mentioned in the previous verse. So then when this example is explained clearly, who is the one more guided? أَفَمَنْ يَمْشِي مُكِبًّا عَلَى وَجْهِهِ, the one that walks on his face in this world, lost in الضلال, lost in deviation, drowning in kufr, as Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he said, غارقا في الكفر قد انتكس قلبه, his heart is inverted. Right? He mentioned three things about the disbelievers, or the first part of the example. تائها في الضلال, he's lost in deviation. غارقا في الكفر, he's drowning in disbelief. قد انتكس قلبه, his heart is inverted. So what happened? فصار الحق عنده باطلا والباطل حقا. The haqq becomes to that person batil. The haqq becomes falsehood, and the falsehood becomes the truth, because everything is inverted, everything is complete delusion to him. So this is the first one. أَفَمَنْ يَمْشِي مُكِبًّا عَلَى وَجْهِهِ, is that person more guided, أهدى, أَمَّن يَمْشِي سَوِيًّا عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ? Is he better than the one يمشي سويا? He's walking سويا, standing up, erect, upright, على صراط مستقيم, on a straight path, which is basically the one that knows the haqq, knows the truth. He would choose it over anything else. He's acting upon the truth. He's walking on the straight path in his speech and actions and all of his affairs. So once you see the two examples physically like that, you would see the differences between them. You would see the differences between the guided one from the deviated one. Right? And that's why as he says, وَالْأَحْوَالُ أَكْبَرُ شَاهِدٍ مِنَ الْأَقْوَالِ. الْأحْوال, the state of a person is much more of a witness than one's speech, because that's the reality of things. So this is how clear the matter is to the believers. And if this is not clear in the hearts of a believer, that means they need to revive their iman. Things are not too close. Al-iman wal-kufr, al-iman and disbelief, they're not too close where it becomes maybe confusing to people. They're not close. They're completely separated from one another. And the same way they are completely different in the day of judgment, فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ, a group in Jannah and a group in the hellfire, how clear they are in the day of judgment, they should be very clear also in this life, completely distinct from one another in their speech, in their actions, in their state of mind and state of heart, and their desires and their objectives and everything. But the delusion that people can be easily fallen in if they turn away from the wahy, the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is when they put forward their hiss, their physical means and intellect. It takes over these types of meanings, so they become trapped into this world. Right? So this is a great example, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and others, when they mention the example of both, is like Abu Jahl versus Abu Bakr. When you see Abu Jahl versus Abu Bakr, even from what we know from the seerah and everything, do you see the difference between both? Right? You see the difference between how the kuffar were and how the disbelievers and the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is what we are always called to be, like the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So the question is, are we like them? Are we, fulfilling these types of meanings to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because at the time we'll go through the words of the ayat. So we have أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ. أَمَّنْ, there's a alif, right? And then the men. Men is as we said, always this is a question. So who is, and the Hamza here is, they call it harf, it's atf, and it's also a questioning with both of them. And it's not the amn, right? Amn is security, right? This is two things, Hamza and then men. Amman. Man is who. So alif mim, and then you have man. But it's written with one mim, and there's a shadda there. So who is Amman هذا? Who is this? Right? Amman هذا الذي, the one. Huwa, he. Right? Very stressing the meaning here. Jund is an army or deputy or help. And it's usually plural, that means jama'a, this group of people. And the same three letters are the root of it. وَإِنَّ جُنْدَنَا لَهُمُ الْغَالِبُونَ إِنَّهُمْ جُنْدٌ مُغْرَقُونَ. There's junud to Iblis, there's deputies, army of Iblis. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ. So the word is mentioned in the Quran in many places, the army of things. جُنْدٌ لَكُمْ, army for you. لَكُمْ. يَنْصُرُكُمْ, to help you, from Nasara, they help you, they give you victory. من دون الرحمن, besides the Ar-Rahman, the most gracious Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنِ الْكَافِرُونَ. إِنِ الْكَافِرُونَ, which means, this is, they call it حرف نفي, a negating letter. Right? So it comes into the meaning of ma, the negating a state, negating a situation. إِنِ الْكَافِرُونَ, that means the kafirun are not, right? The kafirun or the disbelievers are not, but in إِلَّا في غرور, in غرور, in غرور, in delusion. Not that they are deluded, deceived, no, they are in delusion. That means they're immersed in it because of their kufr. Once the kufr is taken away from them, then they're able to see right and to not to be deceived and so on. And al-ghirra is when someone is in state of forgetfulness. And someone, when they say, for example, أخذه على غرة, he was seized in ghirra. Someone was, for example, hit or received a hit or killed in a ghirra, that means he was not paying attention. Right? And this is basically, they're not paying attention, they're in state of forgetfulness. And al-gharar is to be deceived. The Prophet ﷺ naha an bay' al-gharar, forbade the type of buying and selling or transaction which is based on al-gharar, based on deception. The person doesn't know what he's purchasing, which, or things like this. And the shaitan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called him al-gharur. Shaitan is the deceiving one. This whole world is basically either people are deceived by shaitan, adorning the evil for them, or they are able to see the truth. Then the same thing, أَمَّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي, is he the one that يَرْزُقُكُمْ, provides for you, from رَزَقًا, يَرْزُقُكُمْ إِنْ أَمْسَكَ, if he أمسك from مسك, to hold something. So أمسك withholds rizqahu, his provision. Bel, nay, also. Bel lajju, that means, as we said, to continue, persist, from lam, jim. So they continued in their evil. And بل لجوا في عتو ونفور ولو رحمناهم وكشفنا ما بهم من ضر للجوا في طغيانهم. And لجة البحر, like when they say the lujja of the sea, is when the waves keeps on coming one after the other. And the same thing, it's called for the night. The night keeps on coming. The presence of the night is there. As it's mentioned, في بحر اللجي, في بحر اللجي in Surah An-Nur, which is basically the bahr, the sea or the ocean, when it's with waves one after the other. So the persistency of things, from lam, jim, ji. بل لجوا في عتو, al-utu is pride or arrogance, from the same three letters. وعتوا عتوا كبيرا, they rebelled or they arrogantly turned away. ونفور is turning away, running away. Aversion, from nun, fa, ra. Someone is disturbed by something that makes him run away from it. Right? That when you, for example, when you scare a bunch of pigeons, for example, what do? They fly away from you. So it's giving that the state of the disbelievers when they turn away, as if they are being terrified of you or something like this. And also the nufur is mentioned when people would go to do something good sometimes. Infiru fi sabilillah, that means go for the sake of Allah. And then afaman, is it the one yamshi, يمشي means walks from mim sheen, yeah. مكبا from kaf ba ba, fallen, right, on his face. And al-kabab or فكبت وجوههم في النار, right? فكبت, that means their faces they fall on their faces in the hellfire. And that's what they say. That word is when something, you throw something in a well or in a hole in the ground. This is what al-kabkaba means, right? So فكبكبوا فيها هم والغاوون in Surah Al-Shu'ara. فكبكبوا, right? That means they are thrown in it, as if you throw them in a hole, and this is how they are thrown into the hellfire. So مكبا على وجهه, on his face, على وجهه, on his face. أهدى, more guided. أمن, or the one, أمن يمشي, walks. سويا, upright from sin واو, yeah. على صراط مستقيم, on the straight path. So great benefits in these verses. Brings the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heart, the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the fact that He's the creator of all things, He's the only one worthy of worship, and He's the owner of all things. So no one will give you aid and help except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fear is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, to see things in the right way, that the disbelievers are in delusion, that whoever is away from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, there are different levels of delusions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. No one can provide for you except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The evil of al-utu, the evil of arrogantly turning away from the truth, the evil of running away and turning away from the truth. And the parables or the examples in the Quran that makes things completely very clear. So the deviant ones, the disbelievers, they are someone that is if they're walking on their faces, they're lost in deviation, their hearts are inverted, and they're immersed in their, or drowning in their disbelief. Comparing that to someone that is upon as-sarat al-mustaqim, which is al-Islam and al-Iman. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all evil and to make us obedient to Allah. طيب, barakallahu fikum. We'll continue then, inshallah, tomorrow. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, baraka ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.